Welcome to July, everybody. CIRF report for the first week, July 1st through July 7th. Yes, we have July 4th in here. We also have a solar eclipse, and we have some other very interesting alignments coming up in the astrology. Hi, I'm Chris McCleary, National Dream Center. What we want to do here is hunt down the biggest influence that might be affecting all of us collectively, and then figure out how best to handle that energy. And we're not just using astrology, we're using two forms of astrology. We also have I-Ching reading and Carl Jung's collective unconscious. Let's get started with the summary slide. And the summary slide is a very high congruency score of 95. And we have a lot of astrology to go through. I'm not going to spend any time here in the summary slide, but the DreamBot is showing not just, you could easily kind of think of it as relationship because there's a lot of emotion in there and water. But the I-Ching says marrying maiden. There is a kind of a union happening, and that's perfect with the solar eclipse. But oh no, if you think that that's all we've got in store, you've got something else coming. So let's go ahead and drill down all these different influences, and you can get a solid grasp of how to handle this first week in July. I think it's going to be a doozy, but I think at the end we're going to be stronger for it. We're going to do that next. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, I highly recommend you do. We're going to do some different types of videos coming up. Just given the time that I have, there's so much more that I want to do. And we've got a lot of plans for some different additions here. But if you are new, this lower right-hand side here of the screen, you're going to see the summary slide. And it includes all the three different sources of the influences, and then at the very end we're going to be doing the solution, and we use the I-Ching hexagrams, but we also use Sidereal Astrology. We call that getting in a line with the stars, but we use the tropical for figuring out the influence. This is Carl Jung's DreamBot. It's actually not his, it's the National Dream Center's DreamBot, and but it kind of rides through this Carl Jung's work because it's heavy into dreams. These are all dreams. So we're looking through the collective dreams, and here's what we have, our latest one. And the memes are very emotional. That's the red one. That's not the highest one. This is more like relationships, connection, but also waters. We have the word sea and waters. And in astrology, waters are very commensurate with emotion, and emotion is commensurate with relationships. So emotion and relation. Then in the blue arrows, we're getting a lot more hits here. Just life in general, sphere, this kind of universal sphere, animals, sun, sky, moon, living, tree, and sea again. Sea is a double meaning here. Not a double meaning, but not metaphoric. So just life as it is known, not just in Earth, but in the universe, because we've got the sun in there and moon. Sun and moon. Interesting how this is run in Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, June 30th, this DreamBot was run. That's the other reason why we can't do, we can't look ahead on where the collective unconscious is going to be. And but you can in astrology because you know where the stars are going to be. Well, you don't know where the collective mind is going to be. So that's why we have to do this, closer to the time of the projection. And then finally, this green arrows, these are just associations and meanings. We've been seeing some perceptions kind of stuff in the DreamBot. And this is kind of an extension of it, but much more mystical. It's kind of a cosmic type of symbolize meaning, summary, and at the very top, the number one word in this meme is holy. So it's a very spiritual meaning, and putting this all together, it's a cosmic journey and a union. So, okay, so that's the DreamBot. I find that incredible. And then, well, let's look at the first hexagram. When you look at this, we're going to come back to this slide later for the solution, but just look at the top hexagram. As the coins were dealt out or tossed, we had two change lines, the third and the top, and it came out with 54, the marrying maiden. The marrying maiden, there's two parties that are coming together. Now, what's interesting is this whole concept of the marrying maiden, because this kind of gives us a clue as to what the collective unconscious really is feeling in terms of relationships. And it says in the Rave Mandela, or the Rave I-Ching, that's the human design version, interaction in its mundane social context, but also one's mystical and cosmic relationships. Now, here's the deal. Going into the Book of Changes, for the union of heaven and earth is the origin of the whole of nature. The marrying maiden undertakings bring misfortune, nothing that would further. In other words, this is not the time. It doesn't feel like the time to undertake something, but rather the union of heaven and earth. Now, I need to read these change lines really quick. 6 in the third place, that's this one right here, is the marrying maiden as a slave. She marries as a concubine. Now, you know, you can easily mistake this as a very sexual connotation, but it's more of the point here is that, remember, this is the influence. The influence is that on our cosmic journey, I think a lot of people are seeing themselves as slaves. They can't really get much done. Here's the 6 at the top, and the top is the 6, that's the yin line. At the top is the 6th position. The woman holds the bucket, but there is no fruits in it. The man stabs the sheep, but no blood flows, nothing that acts further. For those of you who have been around a while, we have covered this marrying maiden hexagram. This one feels like I can't do anything right. I am a slave to just whoever owns me. And in this case, in this connotation, merging heaven and earth is a feeling like kind of serving someone else's purpose. And so that all is changing this week. And it's a very magical week in terms of astrology. So let's get into it. And we're concerned about the inner zodiac. This is the tropical zodiac with Aries up top. All right. So on Monday, we're looking at a conjunction with the moon and Venus. Venus. What is Venus? Relationships, of course. What is Gemini? A lot of harmonious relationships as well as an air sign. Venus and Gemini, and it was all relationships. That is the marrying maiden, but Venus in its final stages of tropical Gemini, that's going to change the context from just, having your relationships around in your local community versus going into Cancer. We'll talk about that here in a second. Mars and Mercury, this is noting are now in or getting close to Leo. Now, Mercury doesn't really like to be in Leo. Mercury's in a fall position in Leo, and that means it's not quite as easy. The attributes of Mercury don't feel quite as easy anymore. And those are lots of thoughts. Good communication no longer is communicating very well, and it's kind of hard to communicate when you got all that energy behind it. So let's look at Tuesday. Tuesday, we really just have some more moon aspects, except for the eclipse. Now, I'm going to do a special video, hopefully on tomorrow night, get you in preparation for the solar eclipse that's happening at 3:13 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And unfortunately, it's not just the new moon and the eclipse. And by the way, the eclipse is only going to be seen down in the southern hemisphere, down in South America, I believe. But also, you're making an opposition over here, especially as the moon continues past this as a brand new spanking new moon, making an opposition over to Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn. So basically, this is the epitome of the cosmic union. And it's not just a metaphor, but an opportunity for you to really capture what your life means to you and get on that path. In fact, as you'll see here, starting tomorrow, you're going to start to see some Uranus into the mix. And whether or not you really want to carry out any special routine or anything that I'm suggesting for this cosmic relationship, something might be happening in your world in order to just change it all up. This is going to be sudden. In fact, let's take a quick look back on the DreamBot. That's one thing I forgot to mention, was this word sudden is in the DreamBot. And I think that's going to be a factor throughout this week. But on Tuesday, I'm not going to go too much into detail on the actual eclipse because we're going to do a separate video on that tomorrow. But suffice it to say that the moon is also making some Uranus aspects. So a new moon, this is what this is, a new moon and a solar eclipse is a new self. And it's funny because like right at the moment that the moon is approaching the sun, you've got a hit with Uranus and a sextile, and that's a harmonious, that makes things easier. So this change, it facilitates a lot of change and some sudden new thinking potentially. But later on, as we'll see, that moon is going to start to make an opposition with Saturn. So things are going to kind of be a little bit more in check, in balance. So it's not you just going off and carrying about willy-nilly. Saturn is there to kind of keep you in lane and keep the restrictions in place so that you kind of have to either struggle or it's kind of guideposts towards your life purpose. All right, getting into Wednesday, this is where Venus makes its transit into Cancer. Cancer being about mainly the home and closer nurturing relationships. So those are going to be harmonized. If you have a conflicted close relationships at home, this period of time while Venus is in here, you might see a little bit of benefit happening, as in less conflict and a little bit more harmony as Venus transits Cancer. Now, also mention the moon gets actually exact with both Saturn and Pluto, as it's just a brand new moon in this cycle. And so we are experiencing new, but it's kind of tempered with Saturn and even Pluto. Pluto being more of the emotional and maybe some even transformative experiences, but nonetheless, it's all pointing to new, maybe not relationships per se, but the cosmic journey is different. All right, let's go into Thursday. And now, as Mars makes its way into Leo, we have a triple square. We have Mars getting close to Mercury, Mercury about to go station and go in retrograde, the moon conjunct with both of those. This is early in the morning as most of us are sleeping, but this square with Mercury and Mars is not quite exact yet, so that's going to take place even later. So we have a triple square in essence to Uranus this day on Thursday, and it's, triple square. The square does tend to bring up some obstacles, not per se some conflict, but and Mars doesn't really bode well with it obliterates those obstacles. So this will be really interesting and see what curveballs Uranus throws at us collectively, but it's probably not those kinds of changes that are all that warranted or wanted. But we have to trust that the universe is going to be on our side and going to produce changes that push us towards that cosmic union with ourselves and our specific life path. I haven't been talking about this, but that square that we mentioned last week with Neptune and Jupiter is still there. It's within the orb pattern of both this aspect, and we might have a hard time imagining abundance that might be coming up or might continue, because both Neptune and Jupiter are not only slower planets, but they're both going retrograde, as you can see by this little red dot beside. We have a lot of planets going in retrograde. Mercury getting added to the mix shortly next week. On Friday, we see this Mars-Mercury square get even tighter, and we have the moon making a square over to Jupiter. This is further going to be, we're thinking about abundance or wanting abundance. That's what Jupiter is, but probably thinking in terms of excess, too much, or with Neptune there, not being able to imagine abundance. So we might be living in a life of scarcity. On Saturday, we get into the weekend, and the moon makes a sextile over to Venus. This makes relationships even more harmonious. Welcome Venus to Cancer. It's very positive for relationships and even finance. We mentioned earlier that this square is preventing you from seeing abundance, but maybe this kind of tampers that and says, you got enough. You're going to have enough to survive. And then we have another trine with Uranus. So before we had the square, the triple square, now we've got a trine with the moon. Now it's at 10:25 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Moon does transit fairly quickly through this, so but trines are more positive in nature. It eases the flow there. The emotions should be more positive with these particular changes, if there's any changes on Saturday morning. And then things you're going to have a quick little T-square with the moon opposite Neptune, squared off to Jupiter. As I mentioned before, the moon 2 days ago was actually in a trine. There's two fire signs, moon, Jupiter. All right. So then on Sunday is the T-square with highlighting Jupiter, two squares, and Neptune and the moon. And that's pretty much while everyone is sleeping. So maybe you wake up and don't even notice that any of that even happened. Right? We do have a double trine over here also in the morning. And that's a Saturn and Pluto. And, if you are awake on Sunday morning between 5 a.m. and that's 1 p.m. actually. So that's during the day. So those aspects are pretty positive. And, Saturn is not the malefic that we all think. He's not Satan. There's a rhyme and a reason to those obstructions and those refinements in your life. And so we have Saturn to thank. And of course, maybe a little bit more transformation to finish that up with the the trine to Pluto. All right, let's get back to the solution. This is where we've got enough of the influence. We got enough of the major influence is transformation, union, as you could see from all these different sources. So now what is the solution? Well, in this I-Ching reading, when we threw the coins out, we asked that if there's any change lines, that the second hexagram would represent the solution. Well, it's very interesting that hexagram 14 was the actual solution in last week's. So for 2 weeks now, we've been on this hexagram 14 as the solution. Let's keep it up. And basically it's the accumulation of and retention of power through skilled interaction, coupling grace and control. That was from the Rave I-Ching. We're accumulating possession, but not material wealth. We are accumulating power only through the application of grace and self-control. And when you look at the sidereal, we combine the I-Ching and the sidereal for our solutions. So let's go back and look at where the eclipse happens. It happens in Cancer, tropical Cancer, but in the sidereal zodiac, it's actually in Gemini. So where the sun is where the solution is. Okay. You know what's interesting? Something that I didn't even mention before is 54, the original influence hexagram, is right where Saturn is. And I keep mentioning Saturn is really the only one that's kind of keeping back just an all out change. Like everything changes, and yet Saturn is there as indicated by the I-Ching and the opposition, especially the oppositions at the time of the solar eclipse, is to kind of temper and to put down cosmic law into your life. That's what it's there for. And it's got multiple aspects throughout, but that Saturn influence is an important one, because otherwise it'd just be probably just all out, everything changes. And that doesn't feel very good. So anyway, you continue your power through skilled interaction. And I'm going to read a little bit from the Book of Changes. Possession in great measure, supreme success. Power is expressing itself in a graceful and controlled way. This brings supreme success and wealth. The sun brings both evil and good into the light of day. Man must combat and curb evil, and must favor and promote the good. Only in this way does he fulfill the benevolent will of God, who desires only good, not evil. Now, first of all, there's a lot of male connotations in the I-Ching, in the Book of Changes, and this is for sure for everyone. But second of all, it's a refinement. As we get closer to this eclipse, you must get even more skilled at this hexagram 14. And interestingly, it overlaps with the Gemini because of this coupling grace and control. That is the Gemini. The Gemini is witty, adaptable. It gets along with other people very, very most of the time, or when they're in healthy situations, are able to have self-control. Now, here's the solution slides that are going to be put out on social media. Cosmic union, the eclipse. Beyond the mundane oneness of earthly life, catapult into your rightful cosmic journey. We just showed you the keys to the cosmic journey, which is basically grace and control, marrying and union of you and your life path is going to be the best benefit. There's not going to be a lot of get up and go and starting new projects. This is not even really an earthly thing, as indicated throughout the influential threads. It's more of a cosmic journey, and we got to touch base with the things that we can't see, specifically the parts of us that are influenced perhaps by karma, influenced by karma in this life, in other potential lives, and then seeing more of who you are as a person, figuring out what your life path is. If you're already on your life path, making more refinements over the course of this week. Uranus is there to help you. All right, on intervention, the energy playbook is the solar eclipse, the influences of the solar eclipse, and several doses of Uranus. The solution is to accumulate power through inner control. Be adaptable. Get into learning mode. That is the Gemini influence. Learning mode. Be curious. Be open-minded. Eager to experience life. Eager to experience your cosmic life and the real you. Get back into meditative practices. Get back into dream work, into journaling. look again at your astrological charts. Get your human design charts and read about yourself. This week is all about learning who you are so that you can connect with him or her. And that's the cosmic journey. So, have I answered everybody's questions? This is going to be one fantastic week. I'm going to plan on putting out another video tomorrow for the solar eclipse. We're going to have the latest update on the collective unconscious and where it is so that you can ride the influence like a pro. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great one, and we'll see you again tomorrow.